all over the world, whenever the group that doesn't hold the power is saying to the group that holds the power, this is harmful for us, the group that holds the power says, what? Is someone talking? I don't hear anyone.
We are contending with centuries of trauma epigenetically passed down.
It's true.
We are taking on the task of dismantling systems of oppression that have been part of the human evolution.
Yes, yes, yes. How do we manage our rage when we begin to talk about such an intense and harmful experience as systemic racism? I'm Sarah Peyton, and my definition of belonging is when you know that what you have to say is not just going to be allowed, but it actually is wanted.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Rajkumari.
We are back.
Yes.
For our third conversation. And in this conversation, we are talking about your book, co-written by Dr. Roxy Manning, which I am so excited to talk about with you. The title of the book is The Anti-Racist Heart, a Self-Compassion and Activism Handbook. Wow, I can't wait to dig into this. And it's now available wherever anyone would like to purchase it. So good to have you back.
It's a delight to be here again.
But now I want to actually talk about the self-compassion piece.
Okay.
When we cannot hold ourselves with compassion, it becomes too painful to fully face any harm resulting from our actions and to stay in something called authentic dialogue with those impacted. In order to change the world, we need self-compassion. Yours and Roxy's definition of self-compassion is to turn toward yourselves, or to turn toward ourselves, with warmth and understanding as much as possible, in beloved community. Self-compassion is a core capacity that everyone can use in the work to dismantle white supremacy systems.
Yeah. It's just so surprising to me that what we need is self-compassion. In part because my tendency is to kind of turn away from emotion and to turn away from warmth. Even though I know all this beautiful research about the importance of self-compassion. Roxy's book is called How to Have Anti-Racist Conversations. And then this handbook is an accompaniment to that. So it's a bit like that first book outlines her whole philosophy and is very interested in beloved community. And how do we create beloved community? And then the handbook offers exercises and work with the unconscious contracts to be able to look at how do we get self-compassion to come into anti-racism, since, as the research shows, it's key for reducing the effects of implicit bias.
What's a racist?
What is a person who is a racist?
Yeah.
Well, there are two ways that I think about this. One is like systemic racism, in which everybody is a racist. Everybody is participating in systemic racism.
Because everyone is subsumed within the paradigm of white supremacy.
Yeah, yeah. And people who are white have much more collective responsibility for that system since we have benefited from it for so long. And then there's another way of defining racist, which is, somebody who's making an in-group based on the color of their privileged skin and not doing the emotional work that they need to do to tear down those walls. They're taking the easy way out.
For sure. I love that, actually. That's probably the cleanest definition I have ever heard about holding that label. I have a quote here from the book. White supremacy culture has at its roots the fallacious idea that white people are the epitome of all that is good, desired, and normal in the world. This belief in the supremacy of white people and white culture hinges upon the contrasting belief that Black people are the nadir of all that is bad. These ideas largely evolved to justify the continued enslavement of Black people for the benefit of a white nation building economy and business.
It's terrifying. It's terrifying not only that it's endemic, that it's in the white body, that the white body is reflected in the economic status quo. It's terrifying that we are beginning to understand with every book that's published, with every revelation, that we legislated this.
Yeah.
That we created laws and mortgage regulations that made it illegal not to redline.
Yeah.
Within me, there is a living horror, disgust, and dismay as I discover more and more and more legislated perfidy in our U.S. history.
What is perfidy?
Evil.
When the book says, we all have a rage circuit, we're all supposed to be able to get angry. This means that accessing to anger is essential for us to be functioning healthily. Panksepp discovered that the only way to turn down the rage circuit without turning the volume down on all the other circuits would cause us to lose access to our life energy. And we have to do that by linking our anger to our care circuit. When we feel our anger, it can be supportive to start asking ourselves questions. Why do we love so much and want to protect so much? That it leads to anger when we perceive to be under threat. When we know the answer to this, our rage circuit can work for us in a life-serving way. How do we start to access our rage circuit, Sarah, when we are subsumed in a paradigm that is constantly making sure that our disgust is activated from an avoidant or anxious state?
Not only that, but a paradigm that makes the rage of the global majority actually fatal. I mean, there's new research that I just saw that came out that has a clear linkage. We've got the clear linkage between microaggressions and heart health.
For sure.
But this was a clear linkage between macroaggressions of racism and heart health.
Give us an example of macroaggressions.
So a microaggression is any time that we mistake a person for their group. And any time that we act upon systemic racism. So a behavioral microaggression would be if I'm at a cocktail party and I find it easier to talk to white people than Black people.
Mm-hmm.
That's nuanced.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that's easy to call somebody out on. You can't say necessarily, Sarah, I noticed that you talked to George, Martha, and Allison, but you didn't talk to any of the people of color, any of the global majority that were at the party. And Sarah says, well, I just know George, Martha, and Allison. They're my friends.
Exactly.
There's no responsibility that's taken. But as we begin to learn about microaggressions and begin to learn that they're harmful and that they harm people's heart, that they increase rates of cancer, that they increase rates of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. I mean, so many things.
Sorry, I'm just laughing because it's just the level of harm is unfathomable.
It is unfathomable.
And that we're not being taught this, that it is not salient or conspicuous in any of the content that we're teaching. It's
and here we are, you and me, mourning and raging about this lack of it being taught at the same time that we've got Texas making critical race theory
and Florida
illegal. I mean, it's like, what kind of a world are we living in? It just stuns me. So I just need to breathe so that I can talk. instead of just sputtering. And it feels like it wouldn't just be spit that would flow out of my mouth. It would be blood from biting my own tongue. I mean, there's just like
sure.
a sense of, like kind of wanting to beat my head against a brick wall.
Yeah.
But let me see if I can get back to macroaggressions and racism. So microaggressions, small things happen every day, the 1,000 paper cuts. Macroaggressions, no, I'm not going to serve you. You get out of here. You're the wrong color. Name calling.
Yeah.
These acts of public exclusion and violence that we will not, they will not replace us. Those marching slogans of violence and harm, among other things. There are so many examples.
There's so many examples. I was researching discrimination during COVID, actually, in 2020, and I stumbled across research that showed that those on the receiving end of racism actually have lesions show up in the brain.
Yes, this is the research that's so important.
I mean, this is a WTF moment.
Yes.
We don't emphasize enough how exclusion is so harmful.
Yes.
It not only lights up the pain centers in the brain,
it leaves actual wounds and scars.
Yeah. I think you and I can rage here quite a bit. And what I want to make sure is that we talk about self-compassion.
Yes. Now, this is what I was so interested in. I was so interested in my own resistance to acknowledging my collective responsibility and the number of years that it took me to really integrate it as collective responsibility. And I was interested in what are the unconscious contracts that I have that prevent me, again, as we mentioned in previous episodes, from being with the world as it is, from plan, do, check, adjust. So planning and doing is white supremacy. I can do that. I can plan white supremacy. I can do white supremacy. But can I check and see what its impact is? And then can I adjust?
You taught me that the refusal to receive feedback was a white supremacist tenet.
It is a tenet of, yes. And remember that whole avoidant attachment, that whole inability to grieve and mourn, that's a part of the dominant culture that we live in.
In regards to privileged fragility, how do unconscious contracts come into play? In Silicon Valley, we see caste systems that show up in different forms of oppression. For example, what takes people to deny that oppression exists or blame those who are oppressed? And specifically, those same questions when people of color are advocating these things.
Yes, exactly. All over the world, whenever the group that doesn't hold the power is saying to the group that holds the power, this is harmful for us, the group that holds the power says, what? Is someone talking? I don't hear anyone.
What is coming up for me is so saliently this refusal to admit, besides accountability, for me, this is about refusing, not even to admit, refusing to create a space for mourning.
Yes.
Because if I deny and continue to gaslight, and then one is looping in alarmed aloneness,
yes,
while simultaneously having to contend with, dare I say, malfunctioning disgust circuit?
Yes, you may. Yes, yes, yes.
And so the opportunity to step into hope, the opportunity to create controllability, that contingency around learned helplessness, uncontrollability, right? To have choice of safety is nowhere to be found.
I know. And then how do we get to play? Without the safety, we don't get to have our play circuit.
Yeah, why is play so important, Sarah?
Well, I think it's so important because it is the remedy to lesions on the brain. It is the remedy to harms that we receive.
Are you saying that if I can take my collapsed play circuit or my triggered play circuit and I can bring it into ventral vagal, into social engagement, that I will begin to repair?
Well, it's slightly more complex than that because in no way is a person from the global majority responsible to single-handedly make the unsafe world safe.
Mm-hmm.
More what I'm saying is that if we hold everybody's health as mattering, if we hold everybody's contribution as mattering,
Yeah.
if we hold everybody's dreams as little kids to be whoever they want to be and emerge as whoever they want to be that the vice president or the president of the United States,
Mm-hmm.
be that that they're not enjoying the gender classification that they've been assigned.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, whatever it is that comes, this is the juiciness of life, is
Yeah.
what comes out authentically
Mm-hmm.
when we make the world safe.
Yeah.
And so that is my interest. That is my passion. That is why I worked on this book. That's why I called up Roxy and said, let's do a book. And it's because the more we bring, as like with that very first quote that you read from this book, self-regulation matters. Being self-compassionate matters. When we're self-compassionate, we can go, what? You mean the U.S. government legislated that Black people could not have mortgages? What? And we can work through our shock and our disgust and our dismay. We don't have to go into denial about it. We can say, oh my fucking Lord, that is just plain wrong. And we can take whatever action comes out of our authenticity. And this is one of the things I love is that, sometimes I get into this place where I think anti-racism has to be marching in the streets. It has to look like Selma. It has to be, what it was in the civil rights era. How can I make this happen? How can I get myself to get out into the marches?
Mm-hmm.
And then what I start to realize is that everybody's expression
Mm-hmm.
in service of anti-racism
Mm-hmm.
matters.
Yes.
Everybody's, whatever it is that they authentically do. Are they writers? Are they being made safe enough to be able to write exactly what's important to them? Are they painters?
Yeah.
Are we supporting art and expression and sculpture and dance for everybody so that all the voices are heard? It's just like an ever expanding sweetness. Like if we begin to make everybody's health matter and everybody's safety matter, then we get to see everybody's authentic expression and emergence.
Yeah.
And their play. So it's a bit like it's not a personal responsibility to do this. It is a collective responsibility for us to make this a signifier.
We are contending with centuries of trauma epigenetically passed down.
It's true.
We are taking on the task of dismantling systems of oppression that have been part of the human evolution.
Yes, yes, yes.
Social status is part of our DNA.
Yes, yes, yes.
What do we do? How do we begin?
Well, any place where we have responsibility for creating a system or maintaining a system or changing a system, we bring in resonance. So, for example, if we're a parent, we have a family system. we get to work to change our family system. If we're the head of a work group, we get to invite more residents into a work group. We get to think about relational neuroscience. We get to make everybody's health and inclusion a priority.
Yeah.
So anywhere where we've got any kind of influence, we get to use that place to make a different world.
You have here in the book, what makes me angry? 2 columns. What makes me angry? What do I love?
Yes, this is so that we can begin to think about this question that you brought up earlier. How do we manage our rage when we begin to talk about such an intense and harmful experience as systemic racism, for example, or climate crisis, if that's where we're called to be active, or anti-caste?
We find our unmet needs, right?
We could say we're finding our unmet needs, but I like the question, what do I love? Because then it's not about unmet needs. It's about what moves me.
What makes me angry? A refusal to look at systemic racism. What do I love? Courage and humility. What makes me angry? Name-calling and racial slurs. What do I love? Integrity in speech. What makes me angry? Ignoring, denying, refusing to learn about microaggressions. What do I love? Curiosity about how not to harm. What makes me angry? Blaming society's problems on groups of people. What do I love? Self-responsibility, ability to see the systemic. What makes me angry? The inequalities of privilege. What do I love? I'm trying to blink away my tears. What do I love? Societal thoughtfulness and policies. Oof. What makes me angry? White fragility. What do I love? The ability to see the big picture. What makes me angry? Fake news. What do I love? Peer-reviewed research. I actually wrote a LinkedIn post and I said that one of the things that I stand for as the CEO of I Belong was peer-reviewed research. You're hilarious. What makes me angry? Laws that ban women's choice about their bodies. What do I love? Autonomy and freedom. What makes me angry? Laws that endanger the environment. What do I love? The love for all the ecosystems of the planet. What makes me angry? Gerrymandering. What do I love? Everyone's voice mattering. That's very powerful.
Yeah, it helps me so much to know what I love. Because the anger, it's like, without that, it's like a green poison pouring through my digestive system and into my veins. And when I get to say, what do I love, then I know who I am. And I am not the things that make me angry. I'm going to have collective responsibility for them, but I am not them.
You are the things you love.
Yeah.
Every form of racism, including microaggressions, does observable, measurable harm to the brain and the health of the person receiving the racism. The more a person experiences racial discrimination, the more automatically vigilant their brain becomes, disrupting the stress network and making it reactive. You then list out all the tenets of white supremacy. I would love for you to share them.
A reduction of people's systemic pain to a mistaken belief that it is that they think that that's my intention.
Mm-hmm.
A refusal to move from personal offense to being able to see the systemic. The inability to know the benefit that we receive from, that white people receive from the system as it is.
How does perfectionism play a role in all of this?
Well, the more that we think that we're supposed to, one of the things I talk about in the book is the vow to do no harm. And the very first thing we need to get cleared off the table is the idea that it would be possible to live in this world and not do harm.
Exactly.
As soon as we take that off the table, perfectionism becomes the boogeyman that it is, and we start to be able to see it for what it is.
Yeah.
Perfection is what we were told as children we needed to attain, but it's not possible. Doing no harm is not possible. We need to mitigate the hell out of harm.
Sure.
We need to do everything possible to learn about the harm that we're doing so that we can bring it to as small an amount as possible.
You mentioned this in the car today, and you said it kind of passing in passing. Let's define what harm is.
My definition of harm at this moment is impacts to brains and bodies that do not contribute to flourishing, that constrict or cramp, that result in health or brain injury, that leave behind painful memories.
Talk about flourishing. Stu Crabb came on the show and talked about Martin Seligman's work around flourishing a lot, really bringing that back to teams. He said, and I love this, there are no great companies, there are only great teams.
That's wonderful, isn't it?
So just for clarification's sake, the global majority, you're talking about people of color.
So really, we've been saying minorities, 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 when actually these folks, our beloved people of color are majority.
Yes.
So I like the term global majority. I also like it because when you go to Europe and you say BIPOC, then you're saying Black, Indigenous, people of color, but the Indigenous people in Europe are white. So BIPOC doesn't work so well globally, but global majority works really well for this world we live in, which is rich and full of fabulousness.
How do we begin to use the language of resonance? How do we begin to use, can we use the IU languaging for ourselves? How can we begin to bring and bridge the ruptures, the internal ruptures? How do we create bridges for ourselves?
Do you mean, how do we create bridges for ourselves and with others when systemic racism is the issue that we're talking about?
Yes.
As we begin to notice this and learn like what really nourishes us, and to discover people and connections and discoveries and missions that nourish us, then it's just it's really good for our bodies. And it makes a different, really different relationship with the external things that we usually use to try to manage the internal landscape.
Sure.
But I wanted to come back to just expanding resonance for a moment to take in the systemic.
Yeah.
And one of the mistakes that's made in white supremacy, because in white supremacy we think everything's personal instead of being able to see the systemic. We don't know how to talk about the systemic. I don't know how many people have told me that they've stopped engaging about racism altogether because of cancel culture. And when I get them to talk about the story of cancel culture that led to them renouncing their connection with the discussion, often, like 5 or 7 times, what they've told me are moments when a person from the global majority expressed pain about the system, and they made a personal guess, like a personal resonance guess, instead of making a systemic resonance guess.
So the white person made a personal guess.
Like, does this really hurt you?
Yeah.
Does what I said really hurt you? And the person's like, you're not getting it at all. And then the white person collapses and gives up. Instead of realizing that what they're not getting at all is that it's systemic acknowledgement that's needed instead of personal acknowledgement.
Wow.
So part of what we need to learn as we learn resonance, and part of what I teach in my resonant healing practitioner program, is we need to know how to add acknowledgement of the systemic to our resonance guesses for others and also, of course, for ourselves.
An example of that would be, yeah, it's really hard to live in this world right now.
No kidding, yeah.
It's really hard to be part of this country right now.
Exactly.
It's terrifying to witness what is happening to different communities across the nation.
Absolutely terrifying.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It makes one question how to find hope.
It does.
And how to ensure not living in despair 24/7.
Yep. And how to make our way to that funny island of skeptical optimism.
Yeah, that doesn't even register in my brain, this funny, skeptical optimism. I want to have that. I feel like that might be some kind of oxygen mask for me.
But not in this moment. In this moment, you need acknowledgement of the...
And I wonder if it might even make sense that not today in our matching outfits, but in another conversation, that we have an entire conversation in resonant language with each other.
Yeah.
And how from that place of witnessing, the audience might find relief. Because I think that in our starvation, in the famine that we are experiencing around not being known in the ways that we need to be known.
And not just famine, but watching people burning the fields that the wheat is growing in.
One of the quotes that I love is from Jiddu Krishnamurti. Well, there are two quotes that I love, but the one that's coming to mind right now is, "It's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society." And we are having to contend with that every single day. It's exhausting. It's depleting. It's overwhelming. It's despairing. It's heartbreaking. I don't even know what to say after that. Sarah, as we bring this amazing conversation to a close, what is it that you hope for in the world?
My impossible dream would be to have another 2,000 years for your work and my work to make its way through and seed and support and grow the world that both of us wish actually existed. That's my impossible dream.
That's a beautiful dream.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming all the way down from Vancouver, Washington.
What a pleasure.